Welcome into The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. I'm Ken Ray.
I'm Nicholas Raba.
And I'm Nicholas Tacek.
Let's talk about the files on your Mac. They're more than just data. They're your music. They're your vacation pics. They're the report that you have due for work tomorrow. They're the video of your child's first steps.
Aww.
I know, right? It's very... See, because that's the point. You talk about data and people think, well, he's just talking about crunching numbers. But no, we're talking about everything in your life that's turned digital. Now, we've talked about running a good backup or two, and today we're going deeper into that subject. On the checklist, creating a new password-protected backup. What do I do if I forget my password? Determining whether your current backups are corrupt, using keychain access to store confidential information and secure notes, and finally, File Vault, why you should be encrypting your primary disk. Now, I thought for fun this week we would start, as we often do, at the beginning, creating a new password-protected backup.
Well, the good news is that Apple includes a backup solution built straight into your Mac's operating system. Time Machine has been around for a few years now, and it simplifies the process of backing up your data, even makes it easy to encrypt that data, so no one can go snooping through your backup. Before we begin, make sure you have an external storage device, external hard drive, with sufficient free space to house an entire backup copy of your system. We're talking, pretty sizable external drive there. You're going to want 3 terabytes, 4 terabytes, depending on the size of your Mac's hard drive, maybe bigger. You're going to constantly be creating new files, new data that will take up space on the backup, so leave yourself some room to grow. Also, you're ideally only going to be wanting to use that external drive as a backup drive. You're not using it as a temporary drive where you're throwing a couple files that you need to bring into work or anything else. You're going to dedicate it solely to being a backup drive. Apple does offer its own storage solution, hardware-wise, in the form of the network time capsules. Apple hasn't actually updated these in like 3 years. So you can actually use any external drive. There are network drives, network attached storage devices. You don't have to have a network one. You can just plug one straight into your Mac. Time Machine actually kind of works with any of those. The nice thing about Time Capsule is it's Apple created. They make it really easy. It streamlines the process by continually syncing and updating your backups whenever you're changing files. It's kind of the network thing I was just talking about. It can be good to have a network one just because all your Macs can kind of back up and they don't have to be plugged into the same drive. But it can also be a good idea sometimes to have a non-network backup drive, something you're actually physically plugging into your Mac. Something you're unplugging when you're done backing up. It's kind of an insurance against something deleting everything off of that, some malware that's going to nuke your backup or try and lock your backup. Keeping it disconnected from your system and your network can sometimes be an extra security step there. Okay, so you got your external drive, you got your time capsule, you've plugged it in, so what next? Sometimes your Mac will immediately prompt you with a notification asking if you would like to set up that external drive as a backup disk with Time Machine. If it doesn't, you can designate that drive as a backup drive. You just have to open the Time Machine menu. If it's not in the menu bar on your Mac, it can be found in the system preferences. And then you can, from there, when the Time Machine window appears, you can choose the disk to designate as your backup drive. At that time, you should also see a checkbox that is Encrypt Backup Disk. When creating your backups, encrypted backups, your Mac will prompt you to enter a password. So you'd want to choose something secure, but something you can remember, because that password will function as the key for encrypting, decrypting all of that backup data on the drive. And you'll need to re-enter that password anytime you'd want to recover a file from that backup drive. So once you've got the drive set up in Time Machine, you're ready to begin backing up. There are bunch of options available for you can select files or folders you don't want to back up. Maybe you don't want to be backing up the system files, or you don't want to actually be backing up your applications because you got most of them from the Mac App Store and you can easily re-download them. It can save space on your backup, it can save time, but just make sure you're backing up your documents, your important data. There's a bunch of different preferences and options there. You can choose how often you want to create the backup automatically. If you don't leave the drive connected, or you don't want to leave the drive connected all the time, just remember to plug it in on a regular basis and let it create the new backup of the changes on your system pretty frequently. Obviously not something you have to worry about if it's a network time capsule. But Apple makes it really simple to back up your files, the thing we always kind of go on about on this show. But it's an easy step, and it's definitely one to take.
We do talk a lot about backing up your files. We do also talk a lot about, or we have talked a lot about, passwords. I find it interesting. You say, make sure that it's a password that you remember. And the thing is, I might remember the password, but what I might not remember is, okay, which letter did I capitalize, and did I use a number 4 instead of the capital A, or did I use a 3 instead of an E? I may remember that it was my first dog's name, which is, of course, not a good password. But I may remember that it was my first dog's name, but I may still not remember exactly how I spelled it. Or I may just forget the password entirely. What happens if I do forget my password?
Since you need to enter your password to encrypt the disk, you'll need the password as well every time you want to use that backup disk. If you rely on automatic backups and rarely have a reason to enter it, the password is easy to forget. I mean, think about with iPhones now, how you use your fingerprint to authenticate, but then when your bank app does its software update, you have to re-enter your password again. You're like, oh, what was that really secure password that I made up that one day that I auto-generated with my 1Password utility? Well, that's when you hit your 1Password utility to get the password from there. But again, it comes to either having it in a secure place or remembering the password. But what if you end up in a situation where you don't remember the password, but you need to access the disk? Unfortunately, there's not much you could do at that point. Because of the encryption standards Time Machine uses, there's no simple way to bypass the password. However, you could take some precautionary steps. First, be sure to set a password hint that'll trigger your memory of the password you used to set the encryption. Next, you could consider having your system add your password to the system's keychain. That way, if you ever need to access the drive but you forgot the password, you should be able to retrieve it from your keychain, which is encrypted. While writing down your password is seldom a good idea, keeping a copy in a very secure place is one possible last resort. No sticky notes, nothing like that on the bottom of your keyboard.
Kind of one side note there regarding passwords, especially when it comes to backups or important data like that. The time it is okay to have it written down, stored securely would be, if you have family that would need to access your files if something unfortunate happened to you or something like that, you're going to want to provide a way for them to easily get access to your accounts if they need to, shut down accounts or change stuff like that. So, either talk with your family if necessary, figure out a secure way to store the important passwords. Some of the password management apps do have family sharing type things where you can create a special section for passwords that are important that they might need to know. Those are just, some things to keep in mind. It's not always a matter of you forgetting your password. You might not be around to enter your password, worst case scenario. So just something to keep in mind with that as far as writing it down, sometimes not being totally bad.
And then if you don't remember your password, and let's say you have it stored in your keychain, but your laptop gets stolen, and that backup is sitting in your house somewhere encrypted, and you don't have the password on your keychain there, if you're not storing your keychain in iCloud, you're going to have a lot harder time getting that password back.
So sorry. So your advice is don't write down your password except sometimes. But make sure it's where nobody can get it unless they have to.
Or really remember your password.
Well, but then make sure somebody else remembers your password.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
How many asterisks did we put in there?
Yeah, I know. Seriously, it's sort of difficult. And here comes another one that's really kind of it's harrowing, honestly. So yay, we've got our backups going, and that's fantastic. And we never have to worry, except the next item on the checklist, determining whether your current backups are corrupt. Now, I kind of want to stop you right there and say, wait a minute, what? Because I started running a backup. Are you telling me something could still go wrong?
Well, kind of an example from days before Apple had Time Machine, before backup drives were kind of cheap. I used to burn my files to CD or DVD for backups. It was kind of thing to do back then. And it's happened before where I've had to go find some of those old CDs, and I thought I stored them okay, but the media deteriorates after a few years, or that little scratch on it might have actually been important data, and thus some of my old backups, this isn't stuff I've needed for years, but some of my old files are no longer accessible, and that's kind of a bad feeling, because I thought I had a backup, and turns out my backup was corrupt in a sense. And there's no worse feeling than trying to restore a backup file and discovering it doesn't work because the files are corrupted. You can take some precautions, but hard drives do fail. It's a physical hardware failure, and there's no easy way to know what bad sectors on the disk are outright failure of the entire drive. There's no easy way to tell when that might happen. So, in other words, it's really imperative to regularly check the health of your backups in addition to backing up on a good regular basis. If you connect your backup disk to your Mac via your home network, so with a time capsule, there's an easy way to accomplish that. You open up Time Machine, hold down the Option key on your keyboard, and there's a Verify Backups button that appears. If you click that button, your Mac will perform an integrity check of the files. If everything comes back clean, you'll know your backup is not corrupt. It's still safe. Time Machine, Time Capsule, they do that kind of automatically in the background every time a backup's made, but that's a way for you to actually verify it yourself. From our research, though, it appears that only works with the network-based backup drives. If you're plugging in a drive locally, there's no real way, I guess, with Time Machine itself to verify that those backups aren't corrupt. But there's a basic, simple way is try restoring a few files from backup. Copy them back over to a different folder on your main hard drive, see if you can open the file. If everything works, chances are pretty good that the backups aren't corrupt. Obviously not foolproof. For power users, you can actually use the Terminal app to kind of develop a better sense of the health of your backups. There's a command, tmutil compare, on the command line, obviously for advanced users. That command will kind of tell the system to compare your latest Time Machine backup to the current state of your files, and it will let you know at a glance which files have changed, which ones have been added, which ones have been removed. And if you add a -S to the end of that command, the S switch will look specifically at how much the information varies. So a line of zeros next to the file will indicate consistency, that they haven't changed. That's what you want to see for a healthy backup. Again, that's not a step necessarily that we would expect most users to need to take or even be thinking about. Again, if you have a network-based time capsule or other network-based storage device, you can just use the built-in option to do so.
I'm curious, when you're picking files off the backup just to, at random, would you personally go for the thing that you consider to be most important and then trust that most everything else is okay? Or would you grab I'll open this song from my backup, and I'll open this picture from my backup, and maybe I'll open this one text doc from the backup as well? How do you go about, or is it just completely random and it's okay, well, that opened, so I guess I'm okay?
No, I would check my really important stuff. It's easy enough to do a quick text file or a music file, just might as well. But I would be keeping an eye on my most important data. And we've talked before about redundancy with backups. Have two backup drives. That way, if one fails, you're not necessarily losing everything. Mm-hmm. in which case you'd still want to be checking for corruption on both drives. But that's one of those things. I mean, you're taking the correct step for your security to make backup of your important files. There's that additional step now of making sure those backups aren't corrupt.
I was joking earlier when I said, I can't believe this. You're telling me something could still go wrong. But I mean that really is, I guess, ultimately, if you want to try to be zen about it, you can be as good at all this stuff as you possibly can. I mean, there's still a chance that something's going to go wrong. Although, again, depending on how what's the word I'm looking for, how rabid you want to be about it. I mean, there are things you can do, like we've talked before about offsite backups. We've talked about storage in the cloud. I mean, running 2 or 3 of these options in different ways, because as we also talked about, redundancy is great, but if you've got your drive and your backup drive sitting on top of each other, and somebody breaks in and steals all of your electronics, or something bad happens to your house, or, any number of things could go wrong. It's great that you had 2 backups. Unfortunately, there they both go floating down the river. So, yeah, that's sort of... sometimes this show depresses me. And thinking about all the things that could go wrong. But the good news is, as long as you're on top of it, it's fairly rare that everything goes wrong.
You're hoping for the best, but preparing for the worst. It's just kind of the way to go.
Exactly. And understanding that the absolute worst may happen, in which case, hey, maybe your data won't be the biggest issue.
Exactly.
Let's move on. That's uplifting. Let's move on to the next item on the checklist. Use keychain access to store confidential information in secure notes. I understand each of those words individually, but what are we talking about when you put them together?
All right. So kind of moving away from backups, we're talking about securely storing data that's kind of on your machine, on your Mac that you're using day to day. On previous episodes, we've briefly mentioned how it's never a good idea to store confidential or sensitive information using the built-in TextEdit or Notes apps on your Mac. But today we'll actually kind of cover this topic a little bit more in depth. I guess to begin with, a refresher on why it's not safe to store that important information in TextEdit or Notes. When you create a document using TextEdit or Notes, the data is stored in plain text on your computer, which means the data is not stored securely and could easily be seen by anyone with access to your computer. You might not be too concerned about storing your grocery list in a secure manner, but you wouldn't want to be doing the same for your passwords, your social security number, bank account information, anything like that. Also, depending on your settings with your Mac, if you have iCloud set up, your Mac might automatically be syncing the contents of your TextEdit and Notes documents with iCloud, making them available on any of your other devices that use the same iCloud account. So your own computer might be secure, but what about your teenager's laptop? If they loaned it out to a friend or left it behind on the bus, that could be a real cause for concern if you were storing sensitive information insecurely in TextEdit or Notes or something similar, stickies. Many password management apps have capabilities to store non-password data in a secure manner, but there's also a way to do it that's built right into your Mac using Keychain Access. Keychain Access is an app that allows you to manage data such as your logins and passwords, information that's stored securely by your Mac. We talked about it a little bit earlier here with the password for your backups. One feature of Keychain Access that's often overlooked, however, is that it has the ability to store confidential information in secure notes. So think of, I guess, a text document that has armor around it, or a lock and key. It could be anything. The information doesn't have to be computer specific. It doesn't have to be a password for your computer. It could be credit card numbers, PIN numbers, lock combinations, your tax information, confidential business information, anything that is important enough to write down, but you need to do so in a secure manner. Creating a secure note in Keychain Access is pretty straightforward. On your Mac, you open the Applications folder, then the Utilities folder, and that's where the Keychain Access app is. So launch the app, and then you'll be selecting a keychain from a list of keychains on the upper left-hand corner of the Keychain Access app. And normally, you'd just be choosing the login keychain if you're not sure which one to pick. The keychain might be locked in which case you'll click the lock icon, enter your keychain password to unlock it. Once the keychain's unlocked, click the File menu, then click New Secure Note. At this point, you'll want to be entering a name for the secure note. The name should help you remember what information you're going to store in it, since the contents won't be visible until you unlock it later. So, since that part is visible, don't put any sensitive information in the name of the note itself. Don't put the credit card number there. Right. In the note field, that's where you're going to want to be typing in or pasting in that confidential information that you want to store. And once you're done with that, just click the Add button. At that point, the secure note will be stored in an encrypted format on your computer, and it will require your keychain password in order to access it in the future. So how do we do so? Thankfully, Apple once again makes it really simple. Go back, reopen the Keychain Access app, select the keychain that you used to store that secure note, unlocking it if necessary. Then you'll be selecting the Secure Notes category in the list that's kind of in the lower left-hand corner of that screen. You'll double-click the note you want to view and click the Show Note button. And at that point, you'll be prompted for your login password. You enter that, and then you can see the secure note contents.
Okay, that's actually a really helpful tool. And while the steps were easy to follow, I've already forgotten them. I trust that we're actually going to have those up on the website associated with this episode, correct?
We definitely will.
Excellent. And I'll remind everybody at the end of the show what the website is. So don't worry about that now, but do be prepared to worry about it in a minute, or a couple. One last item on the checklist today, File Vault. I said at the beginning why you should be encrypting your primary disk, but let me pose the question, why should you be encrypting your primary disk?
You've encrypted your backups to keep them safe and secure, but what about the original files from which those copies originated? For MacBook users, the threat of theft is very real, and your data shouldn't fall into thieves' hands along with your hardware. Apple includes the File Vault utility to give users more ways to protect themselves from data theft. It offers a quick way to encrypt your primary disk. Functionally, the main difference for users is the need to input their File Vault password on startup to decrypt the drive. Without the password, no one will be able to access your files. Well, that sounds good, right? Well, the setup process is very simple. Like Time Machine, it doesn't take long. Well, it doesn't take long if you have a new computer and it's not fully loaded with stuff. But if you're dealing with a computer that's been migrated from years and years and years of data, it's going to take a little bit longer, so you'll want to give it a little bit more time. From the Apple menu, and we'll put these instructions on the website as well, enter your system preferences and open Security and Privacy. Click on the File Vault tab and then select the lock icon. Enter your system password, and then from here you'll see the File Vault options. From here you could turn on File Vault, set up your recovery options. You can choose to link your File Vault encryption to an iCloud account, which gives you some remote abilities to reset your password or wipe your data. Otherwise, you'll receive a key code, and you want to write this down and store it in a very secure spot. And, we just talked about writing things down.
In that case, I would actually say print that out, because if you make a mistake copying down that that key code, you'll be in trouble.
Good point. At this point, all that's left to do is restart your Mac and wait. File Vault will lock down your data with secure encryption and prompt you for your password. Now your data is safely locked down both as a backup copy and during your normal operations. Everyone should take the time to think about their current backup solutions as well as the integrity of the data now and in the future. Not only do backups offer user security and peace of mind, but they are incredibly easy to create and maintain. If you haven't checked or updated your backup disks in a while, or you see that notification pop up saying it's been 10 days since your last backup, 50 days, 120 days, it's time to get reconnected and get your backup actually current. So let this serve as a reminder to do that now. In combination with how easy Apple makes it to lock down the data on your drives with File Vault, there's simply no excuse for skipping these essential steps.
And now we're never going to talk about backups again.
Until next week.
Until next time, right. Yeah, maybe next week, maybe the week after. But of course, we're going to talk about backups again because along with secure passwords, it's, as we've talked about since probably the very first, maybe the third episode of this show. It's one of the most important things for keeping your data safe. If you want to revisit some of what we hit today, like all the steps that we talked about on a couple of the different points, we do have show notes that we would love for you to check out. SecureMac.com/checklist is where you'll find those. That's SecureMac.com/checklist. If you have a question you'd like to ask or a comment you'd like to send our way, we do have an email address. It is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by Secure Mac. And we'll talk to you next week.